There are worlds where monsters do not know they are monsters. He had walked through centuries, through empires built on corpses and kingdoms drowned in their own excess. He had seen men become devils, and devils pretend to be saints. He had witnessed the transformation 1,000 times, that moment when humanity traded its soul for something it believed was greater. Power, glory, immortality. Always the same bargain, always the same lie. But this world was different. The information came to him not as vision or prophecy, but as a wrong note in a song he had heard too many times. A dissonance, a reality where power was not seized or earned or even stolen. It was manufactured, bottled, injected into children too young to understand what they were becoming. They called them heroes. He existed now in a state beyond simple presence, beyond the limitations of flesh that could be destroyed and remade. After consuming the Schrödinger catalyst, after returning from the ocean of souls, where he had drifted for 30 years, he had become something else. Not omnipresent, not divine, simply aware. He existed where he chose to perceive, and he perceived where consciousness allowed. And he perceived this world, a place where laboratories churned out gods on quarterly schedules, where corporations owned salvation and trademarked hope, where men and women flew through skies wearing capes stitched by focus groups, their smiles calibrated by market research, their righteousness a product launch. None of them knew what they were. That was what drew him. Not challenge, not threat, not the prospect of worthy opponents or battles that might finally grant him the death he had once sought and now accepted would never come. What drew him was the fundamental obscenity of it, the ultimate perversion of the choice he had made so long ago. When he had knelt in that chapel, when he had drunk the blood and accepted damnation, he had known exactly what he was doing. He had chosen monstrosity with open eyes. He had abandoned his humanity, fully aware of the cost, prepared to pay it for eternity. That was the price. That was the point. These creatures had never been asked. They were given power in childhood, raised to believe themselves special, trained to smile and pose and represent ideals they had never chosen to uphold. They were products masquerading as principles, brands pretending to be beings, and the world worshipped them for it. He could feel the shape of this reality now, the contours of its self-deception. A society that had built an entire infrastructure around the manufacturing of false gods, that had created a priesthood of corporate executives and a liturgy of press releases, that had replaced genuine faith with consumer confidence. It disgusted him in a way that simple evil never could. Evil at least was honest. A man who chose darkness knew what he had become. A monster who embraced its nature had integrity in its damnation. But this was evil that called itself good. Monstrosity that believed itself heroic. Damnation marketed as salvation. He would not destroy it. That would be too simple, too clean. Destruction was what these false heroes expected. It was what their entire mythology prepared them for. The villain who attacked the crisis that required saving the battle that would prove their worth. He would give them none of that. Instead, he would show them what they were. He would stand before them as a mirror, a true monster who knew himself completely. He would not fight them. He would wait for them to reveal themselves. He would be the question they could not answer, the truth they could not spin, the reality their system was never designed to process. A portion of his consciousness began to separate. Not all of him. He had responsibilities in his own reality oaths that bound him still. Integra lived, and while she lived, he would answer when called. but a fragment of awareness, a splinter of will that he could spare. That he could send into this broken world like a scalpel inserted into an infected wound. The transition was not dramatic. No portals of flame, no tears in space that required cosmic entities to reseal. He simply chose to exist there, in that place where monsters were made, and no one admitted what they had become. Perception shifted. Reality folded. The gap between what was and what could be acknowledged him. And then he stood in New York City, in a world that had forgotten what real monsters looked like. The sun was bright overhead. The streets were crowded with people who believed themselves safe. Somewhere in a tower of glass and steel, men in suits were preparing another press conference, another product launch, another hero to sell to a population that had confused consumption with salvation. They would call him villain, certainly. They would name him threat and activate their protocols and deploy their assets. They would do everything their system had taught them to do when confronted with something that did not fit their categories. It would not matter. He was not here to win or lose. He was not here to conquer or save. He was here to show them the difference between a monster who chose and a god who was manufactured. Between damnation accepted and power injected. He was here to ask them a question they had never been asked. What are you? The city around him hummed with its own certainty, its own mythology. He could feel them, these created heroes, these products wearing capes. They did not sense him yet. They were too busy maintaining their images, managing their brands, performing their carefully scripted roles. Soon they would notice. Soon they would try to stop him. Soon they would discover that you cannot fight a question with violence, cannot spin a truth with public relations, cannot destroy something that exists only because you refuse to see it. He adjusted the wide-brimmed hat that shadowed features no camera could quite capture. He settled the crimson coat that had absorbed the blood of centuries across his shoulders. He touched the twin pistols at his sides, weapons that were not tools but statements violence made philosophical. And he began to walk. Not toward any destination, not hunting any target, simply walking through their city, their world, their carefully constructed illusion of heroism and safety and manufactured divinity, walking like a monster who knew exactly what he was, into a world of monsters who had never been asked. The plaza in front of Vought Tower had been designed for moments like this. 10,000 square feet of polished granite flanked by flags and corporate logos with sightlines calculated for maximum camera coverage. A stage stood at the center, draped in red, white, and blue bunting. Giant screens flanked the podium, broadcasting the event to the gathered crowd and streaming live to millions more. Homelander stood at the microphone, his suit pristine under the afternoon sun. His smile calibrated to project confidence without arrogance. The crowd had been screened, vetted, positioned for optimal enthusiasm. Signs waved in precise choreography. Chants rose on cue. Behind him, the 7 arranged themselves in the formation focus groups had determined was most reassuring. Maeve, to his right, arms crossed but stance open. A-Train bouncing slightly on his heels, unable to stay still, even in formation. The Deep adjusting his collar, trying to look dignified. Black Noir silent and still as always. Starlight maintaining the smile that had carried her through 4 seasons of publicity. The speech was the same one they always gave, the words varying only in their specifics. America was safe. Vought was vigilant. Heroes were watching. Trust the system. Believe in the brand. Homelander's voice carried across the plaza with practiced ease. America doesn't need to be afraid anymore. As long as we're here, as long as the seven stand watch, you can sleep soundly knowing that blood fell onto the podium. Not a splash, not a spray. Just drops, fat and dark, appearing in the air above Homelander's head and falling. 1, 2, 3, spattering against the polished wood staining the American flag backdrop. The speech faltered. Homelander's eyes tracked upward, scanning the empty sky. His hand rose instinctively, touching his face, his scalp checking for wounds that weren't there. More blood fell. Not from him. Not from anywhere. Simply falling from space itself as if the air had started bleeding. The cameras caught it all. The confusion spreading across Homelander's perfect features. The seven breaking formation, looking up, looking around. The crowds chanting, dying into uncertain murmurs. Then applause. Slow, deliberate. The sound of two hands clapping in a rhythm that had nothing to do with celebration. He stood in the crowd 10 rows back from the stage, between a woman holding a child and a man wearing a Homelander t-shirt. Neither of them remembered him arriving. The security sweep had logged no entry. The facial recognition cameras had captured nothing. But there he stood, tall and impossibly still, his hands coming together with the precision of a metronome. The red coat reached his ankles, heavy fabric that hung without movement in the breeze that stirred the flags overhead. The hat-shadowed features the cameras would later struggle to resolve into anything coherent. Round glasses caught the sun and reflected nothing. The applause continued. Slow, even, mocking. Security moved, first uniforms converging from the perimeter. The crowd parted without conscious thought, people stepping aside from something they couldn't quite see clearly, creating a corridor between the figure and the stage. Homelander's eyes locked onto him. The blue that billions trusted narrowed. The jaw that sold breakfast cereal tightened. "Who the fuck are you?" The applause stopped. The silence that followed was not absence of sound, but presence of attention. Every person in the plaza, every camera, every microphone focused on the space between the stage and the thing that stood in the crowd. When he spoke, his voice carried without effort, clear and cold. "A question." Homelander's hands clenched. The muscles in his neck tensed. Behind him, Maeve took a half-step back. Something in her recognized danger in a way her colleagues didn't. Something in the way this figure stood. The way space seemed to bend slightly wrong around him. "I don't do questions from the audience," Homelander said, forcing the PR smile back into place. "But if you'll wait until after, you call this heroes." The words cut through Homelander's performance like glass through silk, not loud, not aggressive, just true in a way that made the question unanswerable. Security reached him then. 6 men in tactical gear trained in subduing even low-tier soups. Their hands closed on his arms, his shoulders. Their grips found purchase on the red coat and passed through. Not violently, not with resistance. Their hands simply continued their motion, as if closing on smoke, on shadow, on something that occupied space, but not substance. The security team stumbled through each other, falling forward, grabbing nothing. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, simply remained standing in the exact position he had occupied, his posture unchanged, his attention still fixed on Homelander. A-Train didn't wait for orders. Speed was his answer to everything, the solution that had never failed him. He blurred into motion, crossing the distance between stage and crowd. In less time than a heartbeat, arm cocked back to deliver a punch that had shattered concrete. The figure didn't dodge, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge the attack at all. A-Train's fist connected with something, not flesh, not bone. Something that had all the resistance of a steel pillar anchored in bedrock. The impact traveled up his arm through his shoulder into his chest. Bones that had never broken fractured. Tendons that had stretched and rebounded 1,000,000 times tore. The momentum that had carried him forward became leverage against him. He went down hard, sliding across the polished granite, leaving a streak of blood from road rash that burned through his suit. His right leg bent at an angle legs shouldn't bend. The crack of his femur breaking echoed through the stunned silence. The figure looked down at him, not with satisfaction, not with contempt, with something worse. Recognition. The way one might look at something that had proved a point without needing to be told what the point was. Speed without direction, he said, is just running away. Cameras captured everything. The fall, the break, the way A-Train, the fastest man alive, lay clutching his shattered leg, while his attacker hadn't moved a muscle to harm him. The way this stranger had simply existed in the wrong place, and physics had done the rest. Homelander launched himself off the stage, not flying, more like falling upward with violence. He closed the distance in seconds, eyes already burning red, heat vision building to temperatures that could melt steel. The stranger turned his attention from A-Train to Homelander, met those burning eyes with his own behind the round glasses, and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. The laser vision fired. Twin beams of concentrated heat powerful enough to cut through buildings focused on the center of mass of the figure in the red coat. The beams went through his chest, through where his heart should be, through where anything vital should exist. The heat rays continued their path, scoring the granite behind him, melting it into glowing slag. The figure stood unchanged. No wound, no burn, no damage at all. As if the attack had been directed at empty air, Homelander pulled up short, hovering 3 feet off the ground, confusion fracturing the rage on his face. "What are you?" "I told you. A question." The stranger began to walk. Not toward Homelander, not away, simply walking through the plaza as if taking an afternoon stroll. His path carrying him past the writhing A-Train, past the security team, still trying to make sense of what their hands had failed to grip past the cameras and the crowd and the carefully staged apparatus of Vought's power. People moved out of his way without being told. Some primal instinct older than civilization, recognizing something that should not be challenged. Homelander landed in his path, fists clenched, jaw tight. The perfect American hero pushed past the point where media training applied. "You're not leaving. Not until you tell me what the hell you are and what you want." The stranger stopped walking. Considered Homelander the way one might consider an interesting specimen. His voice remained level, almost conversational. "What I am is awake. What I want is to see if you are." He stepped around Homelander. Not quickly, not aggressively. Simply moved as if the most powerful being on the planet was an obstacle of no particular significance. Homelander's hand shot out faster than human eye could track, closing on the stranger's shoulder with enough force to crumple steel. The hand passed through the coat, through the body beneath, finding nothing solid to grip. But this time something gripped back. The stranger's hand, pale and impossibly strong, closed on Homelander's wrist. Not passing through, not intangible, real and present and unyielding. Homelander tried to pull back, failed. The stranger's grip held him like a vice, and for the first time in his life, Homelander felt the resistance of something stronger. Their faces were inches apart. The stranger's voice dropped to a whisper that every camera somehow captured anyway. "You were given this. All of it. The power, the worship, the certainty You never chose to become what you are. He released Homelander's wrist. I did. Then he was gone. Not walking away, not flying off, just absent as if he had never been there at all, leaving only the blood still dripping from empty air and a train screaming on the ground and 10,000 people who had just watched their gods reveal themselves as something less. The live stream had captured it all. Every camera angle, every moment. Within minutes, it would be trending globally. Within hours, nothing Vought's PR department said would matter. The question had been asked. The heroes had been tested, and everyone had seen them fail. Inside Vought Tower, 50 floors above the plaza, the crisis management room had descended into controlled chaos. Ashley Barrett stood at the center of a storm of screens and shouting analysts, her phone pressed to her ear with one hand, while the other gestured frantically at the footage playing on loop. No, we cannot spin this as a technical glitch. There are 40 different camera angles. I don't care what the board wants to hear. I'm telling you what happened. Across the room, technicians were pulling data. Facial recognition had returned nothing. Background checks found no identity. The security logs showed no entry point, no exit, no physical presence in the building's surveillance matrix at all. One of the analysts, a young man whose hands shook as he typed, looked up from his terminal. The thing is, we do have footage of him. Crystal clear high definition. But when we run analysis, the software can't identify features. It's like looking at a picture where your eyes refuse to focus. Ashley ended her call and turned to the wall of screens. 40 different angles, 40 different cameras, all showing the same impossible thing. A figure that stood and spoke and gripped Homelander's wrist with undeniable force, but whose face the computers couldn't parse into data. Where is he now? We don't know. He vanished. Not metaphorically. One frame he's there, next frame he's not. No blur, no transition, gone. The door opened. Ashley's posture shifted instantly. Spine-straightening expression, smoothing into corporate efficiency. But it wasn't who she expected. He stood in the doorway. The stranger. The question. Still wearing the red coat, still shadowed by that impossible hat. Behind him, security lay slumped against the walls, unconscious or simply unwilling to follow him further. Ashley's voice came out steady through pure professional training. Sir, you're in a restricted area. I'm going to have to ask you to... You build gods in laboratories. His voice cut through her prepared speech. Not loud, not aggressive, simply factual. You sell salvation in capes. Package heroism like cereal and market divinity to demographics. You give children injections and call them special. You create power without consent and manufacture worship without faith. He stepped into the room. The analysts backed away from their stations without conscious thought. Ashley found herself retreating until her back hit a desk, nowhere left to go. You ask nothing of them. Never inquire if they wish to bear the weight of what you've made them. Never question if they understand the price of the gifts you've forced upon them. He stopped in the center of the room, surrounded by screens showing his own image from 40 angles. And you expect worship for it. Homelander crashed through the window. Literally through glass, exploding inward, his landing creating cracks in the reinforced flooring. His suit was torn where Edgar A. Train's blood had smeared across it when he'd carried the injured speedster to medical. His eyes burned with barely controlled fury. How the fuck did you get in here? The stranger didn't turn to face him. Kept his attention on Ashley, on the analysts, on the machinery of Vought's power. Through the front door. Your security saw me. They simply chose not to remember. That's not possible. Many things are possible. Your limitation is believing only in what your system can measure. Homelander moved faster than Ashley could track. One moment standing by the window, the next, his hands were closing around the stranger's throat, lifting him off the ground with strength that could bend steel. The stranger's form rippled, not dramatically, just a subtle shift like heat haze or the distortion in old glass. Homelander's hands were suddenly empty, closing on nothing, and the figure stood exactly where he had been, before, unmoved and unharmed. "I came to show you something," the stranger said, his tone unchanged. "I came to demonstrate what you've created." "We create heroes," Ashley said, finding her voice clinging to the talking points like a lifeline. "We protect, you create products, branded, tested, focus grouped, and market-ready. None of them chose this. None of them were asked if they wished to become what you made them." He turned then finally to face Homelander directly. "Did they ask you when they raised you in that laboratory? When they tested you and measured you and trained you to smile for cameras? Did anyone ever ask if you wanted to be a god?" Homelander's jaw worked. His fists clenched. For a moment, Ashley saw something flicker across his face that she'd never seen before. Not rage, not arrogance, uncertainty. "I am what I am," Homelander said. "Yes, but you never chose it. That is the difference between a monster and a product." The stranger moved toward the shattered window. Homelander blocked his path, but the figure simply walked past him, around him, through the space in a way that made Ashley's eyes hurt to follow. He paused at the edge where glass had been. "I am here to show you what you have created. To hold up a mirror to your manufactured gods and let them see what they are. Not to destroy you. That would be too simple." He looked back, his face still shadowed, but his voice perfectly clear. "I am here to make you look." Then he stepped backward out of the window 50 floors above the ground and fell from view. Ashley and the analysts rushed to the edge. Below, the plaza still swarmed with emergency vehicles around where A-Train had fallen. But of the stranger, there was nothing. No body, no impact. Just empty air and the normal flow of traffic far below. Homelander stood alone in the center of the room, fists still clenched, eyes still burning. But for the first time, there was something else in his expression. Something that looked almost like fear. "Find him," he said quietly. "I don't care what it takes. Find him." Ashley looked at the screens, at the 40 different angles of a face her computers couldn't parse, at security footage of a man who had walked into the most secure building in America, as if doors were a suggestion. "Sir," she said carefully, "I don't think we can." The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and failure. A-Train lay in the bed, his right leg suspended in traction pins, and plates holding together bones that had shattered against something harder than anything he'd ever encountered. The morphine kept the pain manageable, but couldn't touch the other ache, the one spreading through his chest. Every time he looked at the leg, that would never be the same. They'd told him it would heal. Weeks, maybe months. Physical therapy. Gradual return to activity. All the words carefully chosen to avoid saying what they both knew. He would run again. But he would never be the fastest. The door didn't open. One moment the room was empty except for him and the medical equipment. The next, the visitor stood beside the window, backlit by the city lights, that damned coat hanging heavy in air that didn't move. A-Train's hand slapped the call button. Nothing happened. The nurses didn't come. The intercom stayed silent. They can't hear you, the visitor said. His voice was conversational, almost gentle, worse than mockery. I wanted privacy for this conversation. Fuck you. I got nothing to say to you. I know. That's why I'm here to ask, not to listen. A-Train tried to sit up, failed, fell back against the pillows. The traction equipment held him in place more effectively than any restraints. The visitor moved closer, pulling a chair that hadn't been there before, sitting down with the careful posture of someone who had all the time in the world. What are you without speed? The question hung in the sterile air. I'm still A-Train. I'm still a brand, a logo, a commodity that Vought purchased when you were 7 years old with an injection you didn't ask for. A-Train's jaw clenched. Nobody forced me. I wanted this. Did they show you what you could be and leave you no choice but to want it? Did they give you the gift, or did they make you need the gift so badly that refusal was unthinkable? The visitor leaned forward slightly. A-Train could see his face now, sharp features that cameras somehow couldn't capture, eyes that looked through him rather than at him. You've spent your entire life running, faster than everyone, faster than consequences, faster than the moment when you'd have to stop and ask yourself what you were running toward. I know what I am. Do you? Silence stretched. Medical equipment beeped. Outside the window, the city continued its oblivious rhythm. What I am, the visitor said, his tone unchanged, is a monster. I chose it. Centuries ago, I knelt in a chapel and drank blood and accepted damnation with full knowledge of the cost. I knew what I was becoming. I embraced it. He stood the chair, disappearing, as if it had never existed. You were given power. Never asked what it cost. Never told what you were trading. They injected chemicals into a child and called it heroism. The visitor moved toward the door. A-Train found his voice cracked and desperate. So what am I supposed to do now? Just accept that I'm nothing? The visitor paused, hand on the handle. You're not nothing. You're just not what they made you believe you were. Perhaps now, for the first time, you can choose who to become. The door opened and closed. The call button suddenly worked again. Nurses rushed in, concerned about the alert that had somehow been delayed. A-Train stared at his suspended leg and felt the full weight of being still. The beach was private property owned by Vought, maintained for exactly this purpose. When heroes needed to decompress away from cameras, when the pressure of performance became too much, they could come here. Stand where the ocean met the land, and remember, they were more than their public image. The deep stood in the surf water, lapping at his ankles. Concentration etched across his features. His hands moved in the gestures that usually brought response. Schools of fish, dolphins, even sharks when he pushed hard enough. They came when called. They listened. They proved he was special. Today, nothing answered. He pushed deeper water, rising to his knees, his waist. Dove under and opened his mind wider, sending out the call that had never failed, the connection that made him more than just another soup with an aquatic theme. Silence. Not the absence of sea life. He could sense them out there, swimming their patterns, living their lives. They just weren't responding, weren't acknowledging his presence, weren't treating him as anything different from the rocks and sand. He surfaced gasping and found the visitor standing on the dry beach watching. How long have you been there? Since you began calling. They hear you. They simply don't answer. The deep waded back to shore water streaming from his suit. His voice came out defensive, angry in the way of someone protecting a wound. Something's wrong with them. Interference or... Nothing is wrong with them, the visitor said. He hadn't moved, hadn't shifted position, but somehow seemed closer. They're behaving exactly as they always have. You're simply noticing for the first time. I talk to them. They respond. That's my power. No. Your power is that you can hear them. They tolerate your presence because you're harmless. There's a difference between communion and compliance. The Deep's fists clenched. Water dripped onto sand. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what it means to be respected versus being endured. I know the difference between fear and regard. And I know that creatures of the deep do not follow those who command them. They follow those they choose to follow. The visitor tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have been sympathy on something more human. You wanted to be special, to matter, to prove you belonged among gods. So they gave you a gift you never questioned, made you believe you were chosen. I am special. You are a man who can breathe underwater. That's remarkable, but power given freely is never truly yours. They gave you the ability. They never gave you the respect. The Deep looked back at the ocean, at the life moving beneath its surface, continuing without him. Then what's the point? If I'm not special, if I don't matter, you matter to yourself. That's the only validation that means anything. The question is whether you can learn to matter without their approval. The visitor turned to leave his coat sweeping patterns in the sand that the tide would erase. They sense what you are, what you've always been. Not better than them, just different. And difference without purpose is just noise. While the Deep stood alone on the beach, as the sun set, trying and failing to call creatures that had never needed him, had never respected him, had simply tolerated his presence because he'd never been enough of a threat to matter avoiding. Maeve's apartment was dark. She preferred it that way. Lights meant visibility, meant performance. Here in the shadows, she could let the mask slip, could drink without cameras analyzing her posture, could exist without being Queen Maeve, the hero, or Maggie the product, or any of the other roles Vought had written for her. The bottle of whiskey was half empty. She didn't remember it being that low when she started. I was wondering when you'd show up. She didn't turn around, didn't reach for a weapon or call for help. Just took another drink and waited for the inevitable. The visitor stepped from the shadows near the window, his presence announced not by sound but by the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. He didn't sit, didn't posture, simply stood there, a darkness slightly darker than the rest. You are different. Maeve laughed, bitter and tired. Yeah, how's that? Still got the same compound V in my veins. Still wear the same fucking costume. Still smile for the same cameras. You know what you are, and you hate it. The observation landed like a punch. Maeve's hand tightened on the bottle. Congratulations. You figured out that I'm self-aware. Want a medal? I want nothing. I came to acknowledge something rare. And what's that? Conscience, the capacity for shame, the awareness that you've traded something real for something false, and the honesty not to pretend the trade was worth it. Maeve finally turned to face him. His features remained shadowed, but she could see enough. The angular face, the stillness that wasn't peace, but perfect control. So, what you're here to tell me I'm special after all. That deep down, I'm actually a good person. No. You're complicit. You've done terrible things, allowed worse. Stood by while people died because saving them would damage your image. The words should have stung. Instead, they felt like relief. Someone finally saying it out loud. Then what the fuck do you want from me? to tell you that you could still choose. Maeve set the bottle down. Choose what to become. The others can't. They don't know themselves well enough. They believe the lie so completely that truth would shatter them. He moved slightly, and for the first time Maeve saw his eyes clearly. Ancient and tired, and something that might have been respect. You know the lie. You see the system for what it is. You felt the weight of the chains, even while wearing them. That awareness is the only thing that makes change possible. Change into what I'm still a soup. Still got the powers I didn't ask for. Still part of the machine. Power doesn't determine what you are. Choice does. I chose to become a monster. Accepted damnation, fully aware. That choice is what defines me. I chose nothing. They injected me when I was 6. No, but you can choose now. When the moment comes, when the system collapses and everything you've built on becomes ash. In that moment, you'll have the choice the others never had. Maeve's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Choose what? To be something other than what they made you. To act according to your own will instead of theirs. To save or condemn. To stand or fall. To matter on your own terms. He turned toward the window. The others will break because they're hollow. Products with nothing at the core. You might survive because you know you're hollow. And knowing the wound is the first step to healing it. And if I don't want to survive? The visitor paused at the window silhouette against the city lights. Then that too would be a choice. And choice is the only power they never gave you. He was gone. No dramatic exit. No fade. Simply absent. Maeve stood in her dark apartment, bottle forgotten, feeling for the first time in years that someone had seen her, really seen her, and hadn't looked away in disgust. She wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. Times Square at noon was orchestrated chaos. Tourists and locals flowing around each other, street performers competing for attention, advertisements screaming from every surface. The Seven's emergency press conference had been scheduled for maximum visibility. Damage control required spectacle. Homelander stood at the podium, flanked by the remaining active members. A-Train's absence had been explained as medical evaluation. The Deep stood at the edge, trying to project confidence. Maeve was there playing her role face set in practiced determination. The message was simple. Unity, strength, trust. The incident at the plaza had been unfortunate, but heroes didn't back down from challenges. America was safe. Vought was vigilant. Homelander was 30 seconds into his prepared statement when every screen in Times Square flickered. Not dramatically. No sparks or explosions. They simply changed, synchronized, showing the same image on 50 different displays. The visitor's face clear and sharp in a way security footage never captured, looking directly into the camera. Directly at the millions watching. You stand before them and call yourselves saviors. His voice emerged from every speaker crystal clear, impossible to ignore or shut down. But none of you were asked. None of you chose. You were designed. The screens changed. Archive footage leaked or stolen or simply manifested. Vought laboratories, clinical rooms, children strapped to tables while doctors administered injections. The footage was dated, 15 years old, 20, 30, decades of production, decades of manufacturing gods. They made you, they sold you, and you believed it. Images of meetings. Boardrooms where executives discussed market demographics for hero placement. Focus groups testing costume designs. Financial projections based on merchandising. The machinery of heroism exposed as the machinery of commerce. You are products masquerading as principles. Brands pretending to be beings. Power given without consent. Worship manufactured like cereal. The footage shifted to the plaza. The moment Homelander's laser vision passed through empty space. A-Train's legs shattering against stillness. The moment when their invulnerability met something that simply didn't acknowledge it. They raised you to believe you were special. Trained you to perform righteousness. Taught you that your worth came from their approval and the public's worship. The visitor's face returned to the screens. Every tourist, every local, every camera pointed at Times Square captured the moment. But none of you ever asked what you were, what they made you, what you traded for the power they injected into your veins. Homelander's fists clenched. His eyes burned red. But he couldn't find a target. The screen showed only the visitor's image, transmitted from nowhere, controlled by nothing they could shut down. I am here to show you, not to destroy you. That would be mercy you haven't earned. The visitor's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried weight that made even the crowds fall silent. I am here to make you look, to hold up a mirror to manufactured divinity, to force you to see what you are beneath the capes and the smiles and the carefully tested heroism. The screens went black. All of them. Simultaneously. Complete darkness in the heart of the city that never dimmed. Then they restored. Normal programming. Advertisements. The facade of normalcy. But the press conference was over. Homelander stood at the podium, speechless, for perhaps the first time in his life. Maeve's expression was unreadable. The Deep looked like he might vomit. And in homes and bars and offices, across the country, millions of people who had watched heroes their entire lives began asking the question they'd never thought to ask. What are they really? The seed had been planted. The mirror had been held up. And no amount of PR could make the reflection go away. The emergency meeting had been running for 6 hours. Vaught's executive leadership, their top scientists, military consultants, and crisis management teams crammed into a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Screens covered every wall displaying data that made less sense the longer they studied it. Dr. Sarah Chen, head of Compound V research, rubbed her temples and addressed the room for the 3rd time. We've analyzed every sample we managed to collect. Blood drops from the plaza tissue samples from where he touched surfaces. The cellular structure breaks down within minutes of collection. It's not that we can't identify it. It's that it refuses to stay identified. English doctor, snapped Marcus Webb, the senior VP, who'd been handling damage control since the Times Square incident. In English, he's not made of matter, as we understand it. Or he is, but only when he chooses to be. Our equipment can't measure something that exists conditionally. Ashley Barrett spoke up from her position near the door, to tablet in hand, displaying the latest social media metrics. All red, all declining. Can we weaponize Temp V against him? Some kind of targeted delivery system? The military consultant, a colonel whose name badge read Patterson, shook his head. We've tried. Gas, aerosol, direct injection when he allowed us to touch him during the second encounter. Nothing takes. It's like trying to poison smoke. Then what about information warfare? Webb leaned forward. We control the narrative. We own the media. Plant stories, discredit him, make him the villain. Ashley's laugh was bitter and exhausted. Sir, he hijacked every screen in Times Square simultaneously. Our IT department still can't explain how he's not playing by information rules we can manipulate. The screens flickered. Every single one. Data disappeared, replaced by a simple message in white text on black. You cannot solve a question with systems. The text vanished. Normal displays returned. Silence consumed the room. Finally, someone spoke. One of the junior analysts, young enough to still believe solutions existed. What if we just asked him what he wants? Webb's glare could have melted steel. We don't negotiate with terrorists. He hasn't made demands, hasn't asked for anything, hasn't actually attacked anyone. He put A-Train in the hospital. A-Train attacked him. Medical says the injury was self-inflicted. Momentum against immovable object. The intruder never struck a blow. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. That's consistent with our observations. He doesn't attack. He responds. Or more accurately, he doesn't respond. He just exists, and physical laws accommodate him, rather than the other way around. So, what does he want? Ashley asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. The screens flickered again. Different message. To show you what you are. Then silence. The rooftop of Vought Tower offered 360 degrees of New York City. Homelander stood at the edge, fists clenched, jaw tight, eyes scanning the skyline for something he could hit. He'd been standing there for 2 hours, waiting. The intruder always appeared when Homelander was alone. Always showed up to deliver his cryptic pronouncements and demonstrate his impossible nature. Fine. Homelander would give him the opportunity. I know you can hear me. The wind carried his words across empty rooftop. I know you're watching. You wanted my attention. You have it. So come out and face me. Reality rippled. Not dramatically. Just a subtle wrongness, like heat distortion, and suddenly the figure stood 10 feet away. Same coat, same shadowed features, same absolute stillness that made Homelander's skin crawl. You called. I answered. Homelander's fists ignited with tension. Every muscle in his body coiled for violence. No more games. No more philosophy. You wanted to test me, fine. Let's see how well you do when I'm not holding back. You've never held back. That's your tragedy. The words were delivered without heat, without judgment. Somehow that made them worse. Homelander moved. Not flight, pure explosion of speed and power, fist drawn back with enough force to shatter concrete. The punch landed square in the intruder's chest. The impact was wrong. Not soft, not hard. Like hitting something that was there and not there simultaneously. Homelander's fist connected with flesh, with bone, with reality itself. And for a moment, he felt triumph. Then the intruder's torso exploded. Not from the punch. The punch had already landed. This was something else. The chest cavity simply opened, ribs spreading like Gates organs, visible, and then absent blood spraying in arterial jets that painted the rooftop. The body fell, collapsed, became a spreading pool of crimson that reflected the evening sky. Homelander stood over it, chest-heaving, fist still clenched. He'd done it. Finally. The unkillable thing was, the blood moved. Not flowing, not spreading, moving with purpose, with intention, gathering itself, pulling inward, defying gravity and sense. The pool contracted, rose, formed a pillar of liquid that twisted and shaped itself back into human form. Flesh renate, bone restructured. The coat reformed from nothing. In 3 seconds, the intruder stood exactly as he had, before not even breathing hard because he'd never been breathing at all. "Your turn." Homelander's eyes burned red. Laser vision at full power, enough heat to cut through tank armor. The beams struck center mass, burned through, continued their path to slice through the water tower behind their target. The intruder stood in the path of destruction, body bifurcated, upper and lower halves separating. Both pieces fell. Both pieces bled. Both pools gathered. Both reformed. Now there were 2 of him. They spoke in unison. Interesting. Then they merged, flowing together like water, finding its level, becoming singular again. Homelander felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood in the lab. Something worse than anger, worse than hate. Fear. He attacked with everything. Speed, strength, heat vision, frost breath techniques he'd developed in private. Every tool in his arsenal deployed with desperate fury. He tore the intruder apart 17 times, scattered pieces across the rooftop, burned them to ash. Every time the remains gathered, reformed, stood again. Finally, Homelander grabbed the intact form and flew upward, straight up, breaking through clouds into the thin atmosphere where normal humans would suffocate, where the cold would kill in seconds. He held the intruder at arm's length. "Let's see you come back from this." He let go. The figure fell. Homelander watched, ensuring no flight, no cheating. Just gravity and terminal velocity and the inevitable impact with concrete below. The body hit the street 50 floors down. Cameras from news helicopters captured it. Live feeds streaming to millions. The impact crater was visible from the rooftop. Traffic stopped. People screamed. Emergency services scrambled. Homelander descended slowly, landing near the crater, making sure the cameras caught him. The hero. The victor. The crater was empty. No blood. No body. Just broken concrete and the impression of impact. "Behind you!" Homelander spun. The intruder stood on the sidewalk, unmarked, uninjured. He'd been there before Homelander landed, had been there watching Homelander search the crater. The news helicopters circled, broadcasting everything. "You are trying to kill." The intruder tilted his head slightly. "What exactly?" Homelander's hands shook, not from effort, from the realization spreading through him like poison. "What the fuck are you? I told you." A question. The intruder took a step closer. Homelander took a step back. The cameras caught that too. Caught the moment when the strongest man on Earth retreated from something that refused to stay dead. You cannot kill a question with violence. Cannot destroy truth with power. Cannot make reality comply simply because you believe it should. Another step forward. Another step back. Your entire existence has been built on the certainty that you are superior, stronger, better, more. But superiority only exists in comparison, and you cannot compare yourself to something that exists by different rules. Homelander's back hit the wall of a building. The intruder stopped advancing, leaving 5 feet between them. "I am not your enemy. I am your mirror. And what you see reflected is this power without choice, strength without purpose, divinity manufactured in laboratories and sold to the highest bidder." The intruder turned, addressing the cameras directly. "You are trying to kill a question, but questions don't die. They spread. They multiply. They infect every certainty until nothing remains but doubt." He looked back at Homelander one last time. "And doubt is the only thing your system was never designed to survive." Then he was gone. Truly gone. The news helicopters circled empty space. Homelander stood against the wall, alone, while millions watched their greatest hero reduced to prey. The footage went viral instantly. Within an hour, every platform hosted copies. Vought's attempts to suppress it failed. Copyright strikes meant nothing when everyone had recordings. When everyone had witnessed the moment invincibility became lie. In bars and living rooms and office buildings across America, people watched Homelander retreat. Watched him fail to kill something that couldn't be killed. Watched the perfect hero reveal himself as something less. Social media exploded. Not with support, with questions. If he can't protect us from that, what can he protect us from? If the strongest hero is helpless, what good are any of them? If Vought created them, who's to say Vought didn't create this too? The stocks crashed harder. Trading halted twice. By market close, Vought International had lost 40% of its value. Emergency meetings convened. Politicians demanded answers. Religious leaders debated theology. Scientists proposed theories. Everyone had opinions. But nobody had solutions. Because you cannot solve a question with systems designed to avoid questions. In the Vought Tower conference room, Ashley Barrett sat alone at 3 a.m, watching the footage loop on her tablet. The moment Homelander stepped backward. The moment fear crossed his face. The moment the illusion shattered. Her phone rang. The board. Again. Demanding answers she didn't have. She let it go to voicemail. On the screen, the intruder spoke to the cameras, speaking to millions, speaking to the machinery of belief itself. You are trying to kill a question. Ashley closed her tablet, poured another cup of cold coffee, and wondered if there was any point in showing up to work tomorrow. The question had been asked. The answer had been witnessed. And the world would never stop asking again. 3 days after the rooftop incident, Vought made a decision born of desperation. They gave Homelander unrestricted authority. No handlers, no PR oversight, no carefully scripted responses. Find the intruder. End the threat. Do whatever it takes. The board framed it as trust. Ashley knew it as surrender. Homelander found him in downtown Manhattan, midday, maximum pedestrian traffic. The figure stood in the middle of Fifth Avenue traffic, flowing around him as if he were a stone in a stream. Cars swerved. Drivers didn't know why. They simply felt the compulsion to avoid. Homelander descended from the sky, landing with enough force to crack pavement. Commuters scattered. Phones emerged, already recording. No more games, no more running. We end this here. The figure turned. Same coat now showing wear at the edges. Same shadowed face. Same absolute calm. I have never run. You have simply never caught me. Homelander's fist blurred forward. The figure didn't dodge. The punch connected with his jaw, snapping his head sideways, sending him stumbling back 3 steps. Blood welled at the corner of his mouth. Homelander felt a savage satisfaction. Finally, something that worked. He pressed the advantage. A combination that had shattered steel. Left hook, right cross, uppercut. Each one landing, each one driving the figure backward. Blood sprayed. Bones cracked audibly. The figure fell to one knee. Homelander grabbed him by the collar, lifted him off the ground, and slammed him through the window of a storefront. Glass exploded. Mannequins toppled. The figure crashed into a display, didn't rise immediately. For 10 seconds, Homelander stood victorious. Breathing hard. Fists clenched. Waiting for the resurrection, the reform, the inevitable return. The figure pushed himself upright, slowly, blood running down his face, coat torn, moving like something that hurt. "Better," he said, spitting blood onto expensive tile. "When you stop holding back, you're almost honest." He stepped back through the shattered window. Homelander met him with laser vision, full intensity, sustained burn. The beams caught him center mass, burned through fabric, seared flesh. The figure walked through it, skin blackening, muscle visible, bone beneath. Still walking forward step by deliberate step until he stood close enough to touch. The lasers cut off. Homelander's eyes wide. The figure's hand shot out, gripped Homelander's throat. Not passing through, solid, real, strong enough to make Homelander feel pressure for the first time in his life. "You wanted honesty? Here it is." He threw Homelander. Not with super strength, with technique, leverage. Using Homelander's own resistance against him. The throw sent him crashing through 3 buildings, concrete and steel, parting like curtains. Homelander emerged from the rubble, furious, unthinking. He grabbed a car civilian still inside, screaming, and hurled it with all his strength. The figure didn't move. The car impacted, crushed, wrapped around him. The civilian's scream cut off. The metal peeled away. The figure stood unmarked. The civilian fell broken, silent, dead. The phones captured it. Every angle, Homelander's throw. The civilian casualty. The moment the hero killed the bystander. Homelander's face went slack. That wasn't. No, it was. The figure walked toward him. Homelander backed away, hands up, awareness dawning of what he'd done, what the cameras had seen. "I didn't mean to. Intention doesn't matter. Only consequence. You threw a weapon without caring what it destroyed. Because stopping me mattered more than preserving them." Homelander's voice cracked. I made you nothing. I stood here. You chose violence. You chose escalation. You chose to value your pride over their lives." The figure stopped walking, raised his left hand. The glove slid back, revealing pale flesh covered in symbols, seals, restraints etched into skin. "You wanted to see what I am, without limits. Very well." His voice dropped to something that echoed despite the open air. "Releasing art restriction systems, level 0. The seals blazed. Not with light, with absence, with the color of things forgotten. They burned themselves from his flesh, rising as smoke that didn't dissipate but spread. The fog came from everywhere and nowhere. Not black, not gray. The color of old photographs, of memories half remembered, of consequences denied. It rolled across downtown Manhattan in seconds, swallowing buildings, streets, people. Phones captured the moment before the fog took them. Helicopters broadcast until the mist rose to meet them. Inside the fog, Homelander felt cold. True cold, the kind that came from inside. The kind no invulnerability could block. Then he saw them. Figures in the mist. Thousands, millions. Warriors in armor that spanned centuries. Soldiers in uniforms from wars long finished. Civilians in clothes from eras erased. All walking. All whispering. We chose. We knew. We paid the price. Their voices overlapped, building to a chorus that wasn't accusation, but statement. What did you pay? Homelander spun, fists raised, finding no targets. The figures weren't attacking. They were simply there, present, bearing witness. The intruder stood at the center, coat spreading like wings, wounds healing but scars remaining visible. Around him the souls gathered closer, his souls, his accumulated damnation worn openly. "These are the dead who chose to become monsters," he said, his voice carrying through the fog. "Who knew the cost? Who accepted consequence?" He drew the jackal. The gun seemed too large for human hands, too heavy for mortal grip. He pointed it at Homelander's head. "And you were given power, given purpose, given worship. You never asked what it meant, never questioned what it cost, never chose to bear the weight." Homelander's knees buckled. Not from fear, from the weight of truth delivered through fog made of memory. They made you in a laboratory, tested you, measured you, trained you to smile, never asked if you wanted divinity, never gave you the choice to refuse. The gun remained steady. "You are not evil. You are something worse. You are a weapon that believes it is a god, a product that thinks it has purpose, a brand that mistakes recognition for love." Tears streamed down Homelander's face. Not performance, not manipulation. True grief for something he'd never known he'd lost. "I didn't choose this. They never asked." The figure lowered the gun. "I know. That is why you will live." He holstered the weapon. The fog began to recede. The souls faded their whispers, diminishing to echoes, to silence. Death would be mercy. Ending would be escape. You will live to know what you are, to carry the weight of consequences you never chose but committed anyway. To exist without the certainty that made existence bearable. The mist cleared. Downtown Manhattan resolved back into focus. Cameras still running, broadcasts still live. Homelander knelt in the middle of Fifth Avenue, not defiant, not theatrical, simply kneeling, hands on his thighs, head bowed while millions watched. The figure looked directly at the nearest camera. This is the difference between a monster and a product. A monster knows itself, chooses itself, accepts the price of what it has become. He turned his back on Homelander, on the cameras, on the watching world. A product only learns what it is when it breaks. He walked away, through the crowd that parted without being asked, past the emergency vehicles arriving for the civilian casualty, beyond the range of cameras and questions and the machinery of meaning. Behind him, Homelander remained kneeling, not moving, not speaking. The strongest man on earth, reduced to silence by the weight of unwanted truth. The broadcasts continued. No one knew what to say, how to frame it, how to sell it. So they simply showed it. The kneeling figure, the departing monster. The gap between what had been believed and what had been proven. By nightfall, hashtags trended. Not my hero. What are they? Vought lied. The footage played on loop, analyzed frame by frame, debated endlessly. But no debate changed what millions had witnessed. The manufactured god kneeling before the conscious monster. The product broken by the truth of its creation. The hero revealed as something that had never been asked if it wanted to be saved. In the Vought crisis room, Ashley Barrett watched the feeds in silence. Someone asked her what they should do. She had no answer. For the first time in her career, there was no spin that could fix this. The truth was out. The mirror had been held up, and everyone had seen what they'd been worshiping. 72 hours after Fifth Avenue, the world still hadn't found its footing. CNN ran continuous coverage with expert panels that said nothing because there was nothing to say. Fox News blamed foreign interference. MSNBC questioned corporate accountability. The talking heads talked, but their words felt hollow against footage that played on loop. Homelander kneeling. A god brought low. a hero revealed as product. The man himself hadn't been seen since. Vought released statements about rest and recovery and addressing trauma. PR speak that fooled no one. Satellite imagery showed him in his penthouse standing at the window, unmoving for hours at a time. The Seven held no press conferences, made no appearances. A-Train remained in physical therapy. The Deep checked into a facility that specialized in helping Soups process existential crises. Maeve's apartment stayed dark. Vaught's stock continued its freefall. Shareholders filed lawsuits. Politicians called for investigations. Religious leaders debated whether superheroes constituted false idols. Everyone had opinions. Nobody had solutions. The hashtag #NotMyHero trended for a week straight. Protests formed outside Vought Tower, peaceful but persistent. People held signs asking simple questions. Who made them? Who asked us? What did we worship? Ashley Barrett resigned on day 4. No statement, no explanation. She simply stopped showing up. Her assistant found the resignation letter on her desk, 2 words long. I'm done. The intruder, the monster, the question given form, had disappeared. No sightings, no manifestations. Security remained on high alert for threats that never materialized. He had made his point. The mirror had been held. There was nothing left to do. The safe house was a warehouse in Brooklyn that Frenchie had secured 3 months ago, back when Vought was the enemy and Soups were the problem, and everything was simpler than it turned out to be. Billy Butcher sat at a table made from a repurposed door, watching news feeds on a laptop held together with duct tape and spite. Mother's Milk cleaned weapons with methodical precision. Huey paced, unable to sit still. Frenchie muttered in French while organizing their medical supplies. Kimiko sat on a crate watching all of them with those dark eyes that saw too much. So that's it then, Butcher said, not looking away from the screen showing Homelander's penthouse from a distance. Some vampire bastard waltzes and breaks every soup in the city and fucks off without killing a single one of them. He killed that civilian, Huey said quietly. The one in the car. Homelander killed that civilian. The bloke just stood there. Mother's Milk set down the gun he'd been cleaning. Man had a point, though. All this time we've been fighting them, trying to expose them, and he does it in a week. No bombs, no blackmail. Just shows up and makes them look at themselves. Hardly seems fair, does it? Butcher's smile was sharp. We do the work, he gets the results. Is not about fair, Frenchie said without looking up. Is about what works. We chip at foundation. He knocks down house. Kimiko signed something. Frenchie translated. She says we fight them because they are monsters who don't know they are monsters. He fought them because he knows he is one. Huey stopped pacing. Do you think he's really gone? Just like that? Probably, Mother's Milk said. Done what he came to do. Why would he stick around? The door they hadn't heard open revealed him standing in the entrance. The coat hung heavy despite no wind. The hat's shadowed features cameras still couldn't capture. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Butcher's hand went to his gun, stopped. Something in the visitor's posture said violence would be pointless. Oi, you got some nerve showing up here. I came to acknowledge you. Acknowledge us? That's a new one. Butcher leaned back in his chair, projecting ease he didn't feel. Usually people come to threaten us or buy us off. You're doing neither. No. The visitor moved into the warehouse proper, his footsteps silent on concrete. He looked at each of them in turn, not judging, observing. You fight monsters without becoming one. That is difficult. Huey found his voice. We've done things. Bad things. We're not exactly heroes. I didn't say you were. I said you fight without becoming. There's a difference between compromise and transformation. Mother's Milk spoke carefully. You talking about intent, about drawing lines. I'm talking about awareness. You know what you do. You carry the weight of it. You don't pretend your hands are clean while you get them dirty. Kimiko signed. Frenchie translated without being asked. She asks why you care. We are nothing to you. The visitor's expression might have been a smile under different light. You are the only people in this city who matter. Butcher laughed bitter and genuine. Right. Because we're so special, because we're heroes, after all. No. Because you fight from weakness. Because you have no power except will. Because you could become monsters and choose not to. That choice, that awareness is the only thing that makes any of this mean anything. He turned toward the door. Do not lose that. It is rarer than power. Huey stepped forward. Wait. What are you really? The visitor paused at the threshold. A monster who knows he is a monster. They were products who believed they were gods. You are humans who refuse to be either. He looked back one last time. In the end, that's the only position with integrity. Then he was gone. Actually gone, not just absent. The warehouse felt emptier for it. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Mother's Milk spoke. Did that just happen? Yeah, Huey said. I think it did. Butcher stared at the door. Integrity. Fuck me. Kimiko signed something that made Frenchie laugh despite himself. She says at least someone thinks we matter. Yeah, well, Butcher said, turning back to his laptop. Won't pay the rent, will it? But he was smiling. Just a little. Every screen in the world showed the same thing simultaneously. Not hacked, not broadcast. Simply there replacing scheduled programming, interrupting news feeds, appearing on phones and tablets and displays that weren't even connected to networks. The figure against darkness. No background. No context. Just him looking directly at the viewer from under that shadowed hat. When he spoke, his voice came from every speaker clear and unavoidable. I walked among your heroes. I tested your gods. I witnessed your worship. Pause. And I found only products. Branded, sold, controlled. Images flashed behind him. Not dramatic, just facts. Vought laboratories, Compound V production lines. Children in clinical settings receiving injections. The machinery of manufactured divinity laid bare. I am a monster because I chose to be. Because I know what I am. Because I accept the consequence of every choice I made in the centuries since I chose damnation. The images faded. Only his face remained. They are monsters because you needed them to be heroes. Because you demanded saviors. Because you couldn't bear the responsibility of saving yourselves. His voice remained level. No accusation, just observation. I leave you with this truth: power given freely has no weight. Worship demanded has no meaning. And gods made in laboratories are just expensive lies you tell yourselves to avoid looking in the mirror. He leaned forward slightly. I held up that mirror. I showed you what you worshipped, what you created, what you allowed to be created in your name. Pause. Now you know. and knowing changes everything. The screen went black. Not cutting to commercial, not transitioning to other content, just black for 10 full seconds of silence that felt eternal. When programming resumed, he was gone. Truly gone. Every attempt to trace the broadcast failed. Every analysis of the footage revealed nothing. He had spoken, he had left, and the world would never be quite the same. In her dark apartment, Maeve poured a drink and smiled for the first time in years. In his penthouse, Homelander remained at the window. Tears dried on his cheeks, finally understanding what he was. In the Vought boardroom, executives argued over nothing that mattered anymore. And in Brooklyn, Billy Butcher closed his laptop and looked at his team. "Right then, still got work to do, don't we?" "Always," but Mother's Milk said. They got back to it. The monsters were still out there. The system still stood. The fight wasn't over. But the rules had changed. Everyone knew it now. The manufactured gods had been exposed. The question had been asked. The mirror had been held. And somewhere walking between realities, a monster who knew exactly what he was moved on to the next place that needed to see the truth. His work here was done. The world would have to figure out what to do with that truth on its own.